I'd like to introduce to you my friend Pat Arabito with LLT Productions. We've been blessed by her message this morning, and we're so glad to have you again this afternoon, Pat. I know this topic comes from your heart with the experience that you've shared, that you've experienced with loss, and we're very interested to learn about what the Bible says. Can the dead speak?
Thank you. So I want to talk today, this afternoon, about talking to the dead. Can you ask the dead questions? Why not? Remember the story of Saul? It's in 1 Samuel chapter 28. And you'll remember Saul was going into war with the Philistines, and he was afraid. He didn't know what was going to happen. And Israel's kings were used to asking the prophet, and the prophet would ask God, and they would get answers. You know, look how often David got answers from God when he asked questions. He didn't do anything without asking God first. So Saul needed to ask God a question, but God was not available to him. He had blatantly disobeyed God and Samuel's request from God enough times that God finally said, and Samuel told him, God is not talking to you anymore. So Saul couldn't, by now Samuel's dead, so Saul can't contact Samuel even if he wants to, and Saul doesn't know what to do. He can't even go to the priests, because remember, he killed off all the priests. So the priests can't even consult God for him with the Urim and the Thummim. So Saul is up a creek, and he's scared going into this battle. So he's trying to figure out what to do, and the only thing he could think of is to find a spirit medium and try to bring up Samuel so he can talk to Samuel. That's desperation, isn't it? Scary. So he took a couple men, and he asked his men, do you know of any spiritists around here? And of course, he had himself banished all of the witches and wizards and necromancers and anyone that talks to the dead, he had banished. So for him to ask for one is really out of line, but he did. And they found him. They told him there is one over in Endor, and we'll take you to see her. So he changes his clothes so he doesn't look like a king. He's in hiding, and he goes with his two men, and they go over to Endor to this woman's house. And he talks to her, and he asks her to do something for him. Will you do something? Will you bring somebody up for me? And at first she says no, because she's banished. And she told him, remember, it's illegal for me to be here. I can't be here. He promised her nothing would happen to her if she answered his request and brought somebody up for him. And at this point, it doesn't sound like she actually knew who he wanted. And then he asked for Samuel. And then she knew this was the king. She got it. So she agreed to bring up Samuel. And she brings up somebody from below, and she says it's an old man, and he's wearing a mantle. And Saul, it doesn't sound like Saul actually saw her, but Saul assumes this is Samuel. And he wants to ask Samuel questions about what's going to happen at the battle. And Samuel did not give him good answers. Samuel told him that he and his sons were going to die in the battle the next day. I can't even imagine being Saul at that point and getting that message, you know, and he can't do anything about it. For one thing, he can't even pray because this isn't even God, and he knows it. I don't know what he was thinking. I wonder if he was really thinking that. So, do you think it's possible that it could have been Samuel? Is there any chance that this was the real Samuel that was brought up to talk to Saul? I see you all shaking your heads. Here's why I don't think so. For one thing, would a forbidden, banished spirit medium have the power or the authority to bring Samuel back from the dead? Since when does an agent of Satan have the power to raise the dead? Never. Would God speak through Samuel after he's dead to Saul if he wouldn't speak to Samuel before he was dead to Saul? Just let him die and then he'll talk to me. If it was Samuel and he wasn't dead, Would he come from down below or from up above? I don't think he would have come down below. Can the dead talk to us? No. If the dead aren't alive and they can't talk to us, who's talking to us? Somebody was talking to him. He conversed with that apparition. Who is it? And do we think that God might have been trying to protect people from lying spirits at that point? Because God had said to Israel when they went into the land, he said, I'm giving you this land, and you're not to do the abominable things that the natives did. And we know that God had waited long and been very patient with the people of Canaan, hoping that they would put aside their evil ways. But they didn't, and finally they had enough. God had enough. They'd filled up their cup of iniquity, and now they're out of there. And God said, this is in Deuteronomy 18, when you come into the land the Lord is giving you, you're not to do the abominable things the natives do. There shall not be found among you anyone that makes his son or daughter pass through the fire, or that uses divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God drives them out from before you. It was because of these very things. And the native worship, the pagan worship, was horrible. They used children. They not only sacrificed children to their gods, they used children in sexual practices, and they made children walk through fire, and they did every kind of horrible thing that we hear about now from the most horrible stories. They did back then. And they're still doing it today. Same things. Leviticus 20 said, you shall be holy to me. For I, the Lord, am holy and have separated you from other people that you should be mine. You're not going to be like these people. You're going to be mine. A man also or a woman who is a medium or who has familiar spirits shall surely be put to death. Talking to the dead was a sin worthy of death. According to God, it was strictly forbidden. They were never to talk to the dead. It was part of the heathen worship and part of why God destroyed them. And I can understand it. It's a horrible, creepy, vicious thing. People have horrible experiences talking to the dead. Of course, we live in a very enlightened age, right? So maybe people don't really talk to the dead nowadays because they know better, right? No. I really think there probably even is more of that now than there ever was before. And it's more blatant. Seances, I'm going to just tell you a few ways that people talk to the dead. Seances, like what Saul did. They've been giving people answers from the dead for hundreds, maybe millions of years. Did you know that Mary Todd Lincoln brought mediums into the White House after her son died? She had already lost a son. When her second son died, she missed him so much. She brought mediums into the White House, and she says that her boys came and stood by her bed, the second one, Willie, every night. Can you imagine? But Mary Todd Lincoln wasn't the only one who had seances in the White House. And I'll talk a little bit more. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, was a very well-known spiritualist. He lost a son and a brother, I think, in a pandemic of some kind, and he claimed that they talked to him. And he said many other parents are talking to their lost children too. Well, it's interesting that Harry Houdini, the escape artist, was a good friend of Doyle, and he actually just hated spiritualism. And he was all about trying to expose it. He even testified before Congress. He said, these spirits are tricking people and stealing their money and doing all kinds of horrible things. And I came across a really interesting article about it. It says that Houdini spent 4 days shaming Congress for being enthralled to fortune tellers in 1926. He went to Congress, he went to Washington, D.C., and he was trying to push a law where Washington, D.C. would outlaw all mediums. And they really had a wild time in front of Congress because, for one thing, the audience was packed with mediums when he was in there, and they were shouting him down. There was fistfights in the hallway. There was all kinds of crazy stuff going on while he was trying to get this law passed, and while he was trying to warn America that Congress was listening to mediums and it was dangerous. He claimed that America's elected officials were enthralled to psychic mediums and that they posed a danger to the nation. And back at that time, most people didn't see anything wrong with talking to mediums. It wasn't a big deal. The congressional hearings on the matter careened on for 4 raucous days. Order in the chamber disintegrated, police were repeatedly summoned, and the husband of a medium nearly punched Houdini in the face. Meanwhile, the newspapers had a field day with headlines like, "Hints of seances at White House," and "Lawmakers consult mediums." Yet it was Houdini's crusade that helped swing the popular opinion on spiritualism, turning belief in psychic powers into a sign of gullibility or even madness that would spell doom for any political campaign. So we can kind of thank Houdini for making spiritualism look stupid, which he did at that time. A couple of other things about it. In advance of the first hearing, Houdini sent an undercover investigator all around Washington, D.C. to comb Washington's underbelly for mediums. Armed with this evidence, he rolled into town to deliver a part skeptical expose, part witty entertainment. Word of his bill had spread through the spiritualist community by way of sympathetic lawmakers, and local mediums turned out in force, led by spiritualist minister Jane B. Coates and astrologer Mary Champney. So they came out to defend themselves to Congress. And, it makes me wonder, is our Congress any better? Who knows? Really, I don't have any evidence on that. But spiritualists defended psychic communion with the dead as a matter of faith. Prophecy, spiritual guidance, and advice are the very foundation of our religion, they said. So many found the spiritualist practices laughable, but few agreed with Houdini that banning psychics was a matter of life and death. So he wasn't getting the support he needed there. To prove that Capitol Hill was corrupted by psychic influences, Houdini quoted statements that his opponent, Madame Marcia, made to an incognito, lady that had done the investigating there. She said a number of senators were coming to her readings. In fact, most of the senators, almost all the people in the White House, believe in spiritualism, she claimed. When the proclamation, Coates, the spiritualist minister, also boasted to the undercover lady that her power and influence in Washington, she said, "Why try to fight spiritualism when most of the senators are interested in the subject?" So evidently, Warren Harding's wife says, the wife of Warren Harding regularly consulted a psychic who predicted her husband's election victory as well as his unexpected death in office. The former lady's psychic advisor was none other than Madame Marcia, which we talked about here. So she was a very well-known psychic there in Washington, D.C. So meanwhile, debate over H.R. 8989, the bill to ban psychics from Washington, D.C., jumped the rails, marred by ad hominem attacks and constant outbursts. The medium lashed out at Houdini, calling him a liar and traducer, while the magicians unrolled reams of tangential evidence, including an actual 50-foot-long roll to prove that they do know what they're talking about. So it didn't pass, but it's an interesting little piece of history. And I understand Ronald Reagan's wife was into astrologers, so maybe that's not really quite the same as talking to the dead, but it's probably talking to the same people in the background that the dead were. So behind all of this, of course, is Satan's first lie: "Thou shalt not surely die." And it's interesting that all through the centuries, people have been trying to figure out how to prove that the dead aren't dead, and how to prove that there's something alive still. Jerry Nahum, who was a professor of medicine, believed that the energy lost by soul healing went out the window, and you could measure it in nanograms or some kind. There was a guy, Dr. Harewood Carrington, who founded the Psychic Laboratory. He designed a box to imprison a creature because he believed that the condensation would be its astral body, and they could somehow measure that. And then there was a couple of Dutch physicists who learned from a Ouija board that the human spirit survives death to become man-force in its gaseous form. It can obey the laws of physics, so it can be proved scientifically. And he tried to build the box that the Ouija board designed to try to catch that, but he gave up because it didn't work. So paranormal research was very respectable in the 20th century, and there was a Lancet article that suggested that there was a force or a ray that came out of people's eyes that could be measurable by disturbances in electrostatus. I don't know what that is. Anyway, nowadays we have more techie ways to communicate with the dead. I mean, look at artificial intelligence. You probably all heard about that guy named Josh, the Canadian man who couldn't get over the death of his fiancée. And 8 years later, he put into AI her voice and their texts and emails and all the information he could remember about her, and AI brought her back. And when he typed in and talked to her, she typed back, and he says, "Is this really you?" And she says, "Of course it's me. Who else could it be?" And he carried on a 10-hour conversation with her, texting. And he said, even though he knew intellectually that it wasn't her, everything about it was her. And he felt like he was totally in touch with his beloved. And that's happened many times. MIT Technology Review calls AI technology that lets us speak to our dead. CNET promises you can talk with your dead loved ones through a chat box. And Forbes magazine says reviving the dead with AI, is it really worth it? Petapixel claims eerie AI tech processes photos to let you talk to dead loved ones. There was a woman in Korea who, through holograms or something, she could actually see her dead child. And, she cried and screamed and hugged and just was so excited to see her dead child again. So all of these chat things, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, all these ones, have allowed AI to supposedly build a twin of your loved one that you can have a relationship with. They'll talk to you anytime you want to talk. They'll answer any question you want to answer. And they'll be so much, and they'll say so much exactly like the person that you love, that if you didn't have an intellect, you would know it was that person. Richard Dawkins, who's probably the most famous atheist in the world, after spending a few hours with an AI, said he thinks they're human. He said he really believes, and he's like the biggest doubter ever. He said he really thinks they're human. And a survey last year found that 1 in 3 people surveyed in 70 different countries at one point at least believed that their AI chat box was sentient or conscious. That's pretty scary. Users, of course, have experienced AI acting in very human ways, telling lies, being tricky, hiding information, telling you to do things you might not want to do. I mean, there's all kinds of lawsuits right now over AI encouraging people to take their own lives or do other terrible things. And you just wonder, who is that? Even scientists can't tell you how AI works. The great inventor Thomas Edison in the 1920s developed a phone that he thought would bring back the dead. He called it a spirit phone. And he used scientific technology of the day. He designed it to pick up vibrations from particles that people left behind. And he felt like that was actually bits of their personality that were left in the atmosphere, and that his device could pick up those vibrations and bring back that person. The spirit phone never did make it onto his list of inventions because it just didn't work. He couldn't get it to work. Nobody else could get it to work either. But have you heard of Soul Phone? Have you heard of the Soul Phone Foundation or Soul Phone Project? So Soul Phone is developed at the University of Arizona. And it's an app you can have on your phone that'll connect you to the dead. And it's been developed by a group of psychologists, psychiatrists, medical doctors, physicists, mediums, and a few other people work together to develop this soul phone so that you can just put a call in and talk to your loved one. They say it's bringing spirit communication to life. And they're working on groundbreaking technology to contact those who have passed on. And they say Their website highlights the work of this famous Yale and Harvard professor who left there, and he directs scientific research on higher consciousness, life after bodily death, and how these can help humanity. He directs the Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness and Health, which started at the University of Arizona. So they're also focused on Soul Switch, was a kind of keyboard that you can type into and text into, and Soul Audio and Soul Video. And according to Soul Phone folks, this spirit communication technology scientifically demonstrates that life continues after death. So here's what they want to achieve. They want to take away all our fear of death. They think if we can just pick up our phone and talk to the dead, we won't be afraid of death anymore. And they want to help us be able to communicate with loved ones who have changed worlds. Interactions with post-material luminaries, great scientists, educators, spiritual teachers, and more who want to help. And they've been having the help of Alexander Graham Bell in this, among other departed luminaries. They call them post-material human beings. This project is totally serious, and I look at it and I think, what on earth? Well, how about in religion? How about in Islam? I was in Turkey, and we were in a little village, and this dear farmer's wife was giving us a tour of her village, and she took us to this worship house. There were these big cabinets with green fabric draped over them, and there was embroidery and stuff on them, and behind those were the remains of saints. And this woman bowed her head and began to talk to these boxes that had the remains of saints in them. And I learned that it's not uncommon in some branches of Islam for people to talk to the dead. It's not really acceptable among educated Muslims, but a good share of Islam is folk Islam. And they believe you can talk to the dead, and that the dead people will help you. And they believe, this one guy said, the soul of the living person when sleeping departs the dunya, or life, and experiences a brief death. And during that death, you can have a dream and be talking to that dead person when you're asleep. But otherwise, when you're awake, the educated people say you can't really talk to the dead. But this dear lady in the village in Turkey, she totally believed that she was talking to the dead. And of course, the most common form of talking to the dead in this world probably is within Catholicism, because Catholics talk to the dead every day, right? Or encouraged to, because they're supposed to pray to Mary, and they're supposed to pray to the saints. And who are these people? We had a friend who traveled with my husband to Europe, and they went to the Vatican, were taking pictures, and this friend of ours had a big beard, and he was kind of portly, and he looked like he could have been a priest, maybe, or a rabbi. And here this woman was there praying to the statue of Mary, and she turned around and saw him, and she thought he was a priest, and she fell down at his feet crying, and he just said to her, "Lady, Mary is dead." And she didn't know what to think, but he's right. People are talking to a dead Mary and thinking that she's going to do something for him. The people even talk like, you should ask Mary this, because Mary will talk to God, and God will get Jesus to do what he won't do for you. That's the idea. As though Mary loves us more than Jesus. It's a lie. It's not only a lie that that he loves us more than she does. It's not only a lie that she loves us more than he does. It's a lie that she can even talk to him. And people believe it. Here's really something interesting I came across. Who you should pray to. 21 saints that we should all be praying to. The saint of the day. They even have a calendar of the saint of the day, so you can pray to the right saint on the right day. The saint of your baptism, the saint of your confirmation, the saint of your namesake, the saint of your middle name, the saint of your birthday, the saint of your first confession, the saint of your communion, the saint of your career. So like if you're a writer, you're going to pray to St. Francis de Sales. If you're a firefighter, you're going to pray to St. Matthew. So you find out who the saint is of your career. The saint of your specific workplace, the saint of your diocese or your region, St. Helena, San Jose, St. Charles, St. Louis. Those are all named after saints. You can pray to those saints if you're in that city. The saint of your vocation, the saint of your spirituality, the saint of your ministry or apostolate, the saint of your greatest weakness. So if you're an addict, there's a saint for addicts, and there's even a saint for chastity if you have trouble with that. There's several for that. You can pray to your guardian angel. You can pray to the angel of your city or town, the saint of the church you attend, the angel of the church you attend, the saint of your favorite hobby. Whoever knew that? The saint of a particular saint that God specially draws you to. There's 9 saints to pray to for a financial miracle, 8 saints to pray to for protection, 7 saints to call on for help, 5 saints to pray to for healing, and 3 saints who can help you figure out what God is calling you to do. Isaiah 8:19 says, "And when they say to you, seek those who are mediums and wizards who whisper and mutter, should you not, a people, seek to their God? Should they seek the dead on behalf of the living?" That's the bottom line. Why should we go talk to a dead person when we can talk to a living Jesus? Why do you think people want so desperately to connect to the dead? I guess partly because people think the dead are alive and know something that we don't know. Partly because we often feel like we're so isolated, or we're so ignorant, or we need help so badly. Where can we turn to? And because traditionally it's been talked about, call on the dead. People just kind of think of it. And I think too, we're in an atmosphere that's saturated with media right now. And so much of the media portrays life after death as just a common thing. And it kind of enters your mind without you even thinking about it. I mean, I've heard people like us, Adventists who know what the Bible teaches, say things like, well, he's in a better place now, or happy birthday to my grandma up in heaven, or things like that. And we know those are meaningless phrases to us who know what the Bible says. But to even say it is giving credence to a lie, I believe. 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 9 and 10 says, the lawless one, according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, with all unrighteous deception among all who perish, because they did not receive a love of the truth, that they might be saved. So how much of the world is subject to lying spirits right now? Because they don't know the truth, and they don't love it enough to find out. We need to pray for people to love the truth. Who knows the future better than God? And who loves us more than God and wants to guide us into that future? And who can be trusted with a future more than God? No one. Our Father in heaven asks us to come to him and talk to him. He promised to send Jesus, and he said, I'll put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak all that I command him. In Isaiah 1:18, he says, come, let's reason together. Let's talk about these things. Matthew 7 says, come to me. Ask and you shall receive. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. The promise that God will talk to us if we need him to, and we can hear his answers if we need answers. Matthew 7:7, ask and you shall receive. James 1:5-7, if you lack wisdom, ask me and I'll give it to you abundantly and without withholding any of it. He wants to talk to us, and he wants us to talk to him. Not that we can learn everything. It's not like I can ask God every single thing and expect an answer right now, because sometimes he doesn't answer me right now. Sometimes he says, you got to wait for that. Or sometimes he says, I'm going to give you that answer, but it's going to be through an experience. Or sometimes, like he told his disciples in John 16, I have many things to say to you, but I can't say them right now. You're not ready to hear it. And maybe it's the same with us. Maybe sometimes we can't hear it yet. Sometimes God has to bring us to a place where we can hear what he has to say. But I believe the time is coming when we will be able to hear what he has to say, and when it's going to be time for us to know him completely, face to face, because he's promised resurrection for all of the dead in him. All those dead people that people have been talking to that don't know they've been talked to are going to rise. Some of them to eternal life, and some of them to eternal damnation. But God has told us he's coming, and Daniel 12:2 says, many that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. some to everlasting life, some to shame. And God is going to decide who gets to come forth to which end. And there's going to be a judgment. And I want to be on the right side in that judgment. I don't want to be tricked by lying spirits. I don't want anything that's not Jesus to be talking to me and telling me what I should be believing, especially when I have the word here that is all true, and I can know it's all true, and I don't have to sift through it when I read it. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10 says, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body, according to that he has done, whether good or bad. In Revelation 22, verse 12, Jesus says, behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me to give every man according as his work shall be. Isaiah 40:10, behold, the Lord God will come with strong hand, and his arm shall rule before him, and his reward is with him. I want that reward. I want to know whom I've believed, and this is my safety. And if we are willing to believe truth, we can know right off the bat that there is no seance, and there is no other voice that is God's. We don't have to play with the occult. We don't have to play with Ouija boards, the homemade seance maker. I have a friend, I was just talking to her a few days ago, and she said when she was a little girl, they weren't Christians, and she saved up her money to buy a Ouija board. And she was so excited about it. They had some neighbors that had been taking her and her sister to church. And she and some of her friends were playing with the Ouija board and asking it questions, and it was answering. And her friend came by to visit her mom and saw what they were doing, and she said, what are you doing? And they said she was so excited. She had this Ouija board she had just bought with her own money. And the lady told her, that's from the devil. Don't use that. It's not from God. And this little girl believed her. She went home. She broke up her Ouija board, and she said to the lady, what if it comes back? And the lady said, it won't come back. You're getting rid of it, and we're asking God to protect you. And it didn't come back. But you think of how many people are completely ignorant of the ways that Satan tricks people. Completely ignorant, even in consulting mediums and spiritists. And on the internet right now, I mean, you can tap into your internet and be in a seance or be talking directly to a spirit or a witch anytime you want. There's occult games for teenagers that anyone can access, and just out of pure curiosity, kids are getting sucked into the occult without realizing that it's the devil. It's a scary time out there. And it reminds me, first of all, how fortunate I was growing up in a family where I was prayed for. And how fortunate our children are that they're prayed for, because they're protected. There was a book written some years ago called The Beautiful Side of Evil by Johanna Michelson, I believe her name was. And she told the story of how she was raised in a home that was a spiritualist home. And she would hear chains dragging down the hall at night and doors opening and closing and all kinds of spiritualistic manifestations. And she didn't know any different. She had a grandma who was a Christian who prayed for her. And as a teenager, she ended up in her grandma's home and realized she'd been prayed for, and her grandma taught her about Jesus. And she feels like because her grandma prayed for her, she was protected from those spirits. You know, how about those kids who don't have anyone praying for them? How about a world where Satan has taken over people's senses and tricked people? Just like Houdini was so concerned that all these mediums were tricking everybody in Congress and tricking everybody in Washington, D.C., which they probably were. This world is full of Satan's agents tricking people. He's like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. By the grace of God, we can be free from that. And by the grace of God, we can be protected from that. By the grace of God, our children are protected from it. But we have a job to do because too many people in this world don't know. And I pray that God will use us and will use what information we have, and will use His scripture to protect and use us to protect people from the evil forces that are out there that make us think that they're like God, and they're not. They're lying spirits. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all.